Okay, it's time, so I think we can go around and do names. If you want to share anything about yourself, you can too. Stan, do you want to go first?
Oh, my name is Stan Olson. Lived in Tokyo a long time. Thank you very much.
Hi, I'm David Chen. I just moved to Tokyo about a month ago. I'm just getting happy.
Morning, my name is Anthony. I moved to Japan about
Again, please, your first name?
Anthony.
Anthony.
That's great, Anthony. I moved to Japan, I guess, in August last year, and I've been attending the church for about 4 months now.
My name is Koshi Katsuno. I live in Tokyo.
My name is Zoe. I've lived in Tokyo for about a year.
My name is Yuki. I normally live in, Los Angeles, all sorts of places I was visiting Tokyo.
My name is Henry. I'm visiting from Singapore.
Yoshie. This is my husband.
I'm well, I'm with China.
I'm Tinker. I'm long from, I come here a long time, a decade, something like that.
Great, thank you. So, and you all know why we're having a class on this, right? It's been part of our Lenten reading at this church that we read Pachiko together, and that's because we're hosting Min Jin next Sunday. This time, there was a chance that she could come in person, but she's so busy with other things, so we're just going to host it virtually. So, yeah, that's why we're talking about Pachiko, and I've heard so many people talk about this, right? Obama said about the book that it's a powerful story about resilience and compassion. And then New York Times in 2024 asked more than 500 writers and editors what their favorite book of this current century has been, and that was Pachiko was voted number 15 in that list. So it's been highly acclaimed. So what we're gonna do today, we're gonna talk a little bit about Min Jin, and then we're gonna talk about her ties with the Tokyo Union Church. Her family, her husband Christoph, he was more involved than she was, and then she spoke a little bit about her time in Tokyo, speaking a little bit that. And then there are a lot of characters in Pachiko. It spans about a century, and it's about 4 generations. So we're gonna go over some characters, and then we're gonna go through the plot a little bit, and then I want to share a little bit about how she wrote the book, and then we're gonna end with some of these passages, some of these excerpts from the book that we can discuss. That's kind of the program for today. So about Min Jin, she was born in Seoul in 1968, and she moved to Queens when she was 7, and she's lived mostly in the U.S. since then, other than the 4 years that she spent here. Her husband was a banker here, and she talks a lot about her immigration experience, how her parents had middle upper class jobs when back in Korea, so when they morning, one of these excerpts. What's your name?
Amy.
Okay. And then now she's a proud resident of Harlem. And her grandpa was a Presbyterian minister who had a church and an orphanage school in Busan, it's the southeastern part of Korea, and then a little island of Yongdo of Busan is where the book starts. And then she's talked about how, like, even though her grandpa was a pastor, was not perfect, how she's seen him walk or talk, right? He did, and then she went to Yale, like one of you here, at least one of you here, and she studied history in college, and then this work especially is very historically grounded. And she went to law school at Georgetown in Washington, D.C. And she studied law for 2 years, and then before becoming a full-time writer. And her first book was Free Food for Millionaires, which came out in 2007. And she says this took 1,000 years to write. So it wasn't easy for her to get started. And then Pachiko took another 10 years to get published. So yeah, her say they should be lucky to have 5 books out in her lifetime, which it takes her a long time to write. And then she's preparing another novel now. She has this like a Korean trilogy that she wants to complete, and then the next one is called Korean Hagwon. She said Korean like a cram school, maybe that will be out around 2027. You know. And so during the time she writes, she's also been a freelance journalist. She writes for various publications, many of them based in New York. And she was asked who have been the most influential writers for you, and she mentions a lot of European and American writers from the 19th and 20th centuries. She's explicit that I'm not like a postmodern writer. She's kind of in like a more old school kind of traditional Victorian novels are familiar for her. And then now, yeah, so she was asked who are your favorite writers, and these are some Japanese writers that she's named, those two who have been influential for her. Haruki Murakami, Kazuo Ishiguro, who was a Nobel laureate, Japanese, British, and Tanizaki was a mid-20th century Japanese novelist. You know, so, and then now I see her. Now she's goes to Fifth Avenue Presbyterian Church. I worked there last year, so I see her around. And then she and her family is able to do call to worship together. And then I've seen her at like restaurants in Koreatown in New York and stuff. So she's a New Yorker. And then she was asked, oh, by the way, feel free to stop me anytime if you have questions or if you have anything you'd like to add. She was asked, do you think there are certain themes that you gravitate toward a writer? And then she said, my subjects are history, war, economics, class, sex, gender, and religion. And then I think my themes are forgiveness, loss, desire, aspiration, failure, duty, and faith. And I think those are subject and themes I'm interested in, but then she does write explicitly about sex. There's like a gay sex in this book too, and there's a good amount of it, which I think I'd love to recommend this to, you know, like my mom and grandma. But I think it's kind of like R-rated, so I think the like, Asian sensibility probably no, but she's an American writer. And she was asked, why did you choose to title your novel Pachiko? Do you all know what Pachiko is? Yes. Have any of you been to a parlor?
Many years ago.
Many years ago. What was your experience?
Just weird. I mean, I talked to different people. Some people say they can make money doing it. I could see the addictive nature of the whole thing. I just people waiting before it.
How is it different from a casino?
Again?
How is it different from a casino?
Casino? It's much smaller. It's one game, and they know that apparently they hit the little things that stick out, the nails that stick out, and so it changes each and every day. So nobody, if somebody finds a way to make it work in the machine, then they change it the next time. Isn't that right?
Yeah,
There's certain things that they do.
I've
so-
only done like for 2,000 words or 3,000 words, and I lost like within 10 minutes or something. I felt so bad. Yeah. Somebody may, yeah. Don't know the fun of it.
Outside the store, there's the shop where you can change your balls for something else. It's got TUC on it. I go by there and look, oh, it's a different TUC, I guess.
Yeah, when you Google TUC, sometimes it comes up.
Oh, I've never done that, but I
Will
would.
Pachiko comes up if you Google something in YouTube?
No, TUC.
No, TUC. Yeah.
It's where you can make money instead, you can get money back from it instead of just some kind of gift or kind of meaningless thing that you can get. Like I said, I have not. Somebody else has an interest in going. My brother wanted to go in one time, and that was it. So it's kind of a curiosity, and as our Korean friends know, it's one of the only businesses Koreans could get into back in the day.
Yeah.
And so that's what they did. And then she said, "This is a huge business in Japan." Interesting.
Min Jin talks about how Pachiko is a bigger industry than Japanese automobile
Yeah.
industry.
What?
Toyota, Nissan together, Pachiko is a bigger industry. And then I read how 1 in 7 Japanese adults play Pachinko regularly. Yeah, and then she also talked about how that was only one of the only kind of career prospects that were open to Koreans. It was that and yakiniku, Korea barbecue restaurants. Yeah, she's a very kind of a journalistic novelist too, so she interviews a lot for, she talks about, I'm going to talk a little bit about it later, interviewing a lot of Korean and Japanese for writing her book. And she says like every Korean Japanese has a Pachinko person somewhere in their family, or Pachinko yakiniku person somewhere in their family. So, yeah, then the characters, we see them, there are many characters in the book who work in Pachinko, and they begin their day early, tinkering with Pachinko machines. So, and then she was asked, why did you choose to title your novel Pachinko? And she said, for me, the Pachinko business and the games all serve as metaphors for the history of Koreans in Japan. People caught in a seemingly random global conflict as they win, lose, and struggle for their place and for their lives. So, initially she wanted to, as I'll talk about it later, she wanted to name her book Motherland, which is a book to kind of
Can you keep your voice up, please? Don't look down when you're speaking.
Oh, okay, yeah. She was thinking about naming her book. Yeah, we're just talking a little bit about Min Jin, and then we're going to go to her family and her ties with Token Union Church. Chin, you may remember her. Do you remember?
I think she moved in different circles from me, so actually.
Even when she was in Japan.
Yes, even when she, yeah, that happens a lot.
Were any of you here at Tokyo Union Church 2007 to 2011?
It happens especially if somebody attends the 8:30 service always, and
Yeah.
someone else attends the 11. You can go for years without your paths ever crossing.
Yeah, so she was Min Jin, so her husband is Chris Duffy, and then their kid is Sam Duffy. And then this is them in 2019 in their glam. It's at some New York event. And this is then in 2011. And this is from you probably all are familiar with Koinonia magazine. Because Jean, you might have worked with some of the issues. So this is from 2011 Koinonia magazine. And then it's talking about I think it's known ministry with our homeless neighbors ministry. That was the end of the year dinner that they had, and there were more than 80 TUC members involved, feeding more than 275 folks experiencing homelessness. So the photos from that, that's Sam there, that's Chris, and that's Min Jin. This was the only photo of Min Jin I could find in the archives, but we also have a record that she was, that her family served as ushers.
I remember her.
You remember
No,
serving as an
yeah,
usher?
her face and didn't match my memory, but now I remember.
How was she?
I wasn't like close or anything, but her son was probably part of the youth group, and we once opened up our place to the youth, and I remember the son came. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. And so this is at the end of the book, here in the acknowledgement section. And here are some TUC names that came up in her acknowledgement. Mary Fish Harden, Matthew Harden, right? Pastor Max has a church in LA now, and I think we're just fundraising for his church that burned in LA. And then I heard Pastor Matt and Mary met at the church, right? I think Mary was an elder, and they got married, and then they moved to LA. And then Kathy Masui is also named, and then she's the one. She and I will be hosting a conversation next Sunday with Min Jin. And then she ends the acknowledgements with talking about her family. She says, "Chris and Sam, you fill my life with wonder and grace. Thank you for being my family." It's And then more so than Min Jin, her husband Chris was very involved with Tokyo Union Church. And this is her kind of the little biological blurb he wrote for the elder document nomination. And he was just elected as a vice president of Tokyo Union Church in February 2011. But then there's March 2011 is when the earthquake and the tsunami strikes. So I think they kind of went back abruptly. But yeah, maybe they'll still been here if we want for 311. So yeah, and then there's Chris says about his time here that at TUC I really enjoyed the opportunity to not only continue my spiritual journey but also to get involved in the ministry of the church. Working in the homeless ministry and even ushering has not only helped bring me closer to my fellow church members, but it's also let the Holy Spirit really start to shape me. And then Min Jin was also asked how writing Pachiko was different from writing Free Fruit from the Linears, and then here's how kind of she responded about her time in Tokyo. She said, in Tokyo, I was researching, interviewing, and writing all the time. I was also profoundly homesick and melancholy in a way that I'd never been before. I missed my family and my friends deeply. I yearned for openness, hospitality, and optimism of Americans. Living as an adult expatriate in Japan reminded me again of what my characters who lost their birthplace experienced in Pachiko. And so she also talks a lot about things she enjoyed in Japan, but I think she found Japanese society kind of hard to, it's not as open and bubbly as the American culture. And I think hopefully Tokyo Union Church served as a good home for her while she was experiencing this. So yeah, let's get to the characters. I mean, it's like War and Peace. This is like a 500-page novel. So as I mentioned, it spans almost a century. I guess you can kind of say these are kind of the first, second generation patriarchs and matriarchs. And then the first character, Kuni, who's a fisherman, is born in 1883. And then 1907 is near Busan. Busan is at the southeastern tip of Korea. And then Isak is kind of he's a minister from Pyongyang. He's born in 1907. And then the 1910 is when Japan becomes when Korea becomes a colony of Japan. So that's pretty important. Because that is why a lot of Koreans move here. I think historically some were kind of drafted as laborers at mines and factories, but they moved voluntarily because Yosef has already moved to, Isak's brother Yosef has already moved to Japan, Osaka, for economic opportunities. And 1910s, in the mid-1910s, Sonja is born. She's this character here, and then she's the main protagonist. And 1932 is when Sonja marries Isak. And 1932, Hansu is Noah is born. So she has an affair with, she's kind of a countryside small town girl, but then she meets this guy named Ko Hansu. He's a Chinese Korean residing in Japan. And then he's a big business person, a fish broker at the time. He also has a construction company, and then we learned that later that he's kind of a Yakuza ties too. But yeah, they meet in Yeongdo, an island of Busan, and he kind of falls for a teenage Sonja. And then they have an affair, and then the child Noah is born. And after Sonja realizes that Ko Hansu is already married to a Japanese lady and has a family in Osaka, she refuses to see Ko Hansu. But then the child is born later in Osaka, and then after she becomes pregnant, she meets Isak. Isak was so the Huni and then Yangji open a boarding house for guests, and then Isak was a guest at their house. and has tuberculosis, so he almost dies when they're staying there. But then the boarding house family kind of keeps him alive, and then looks after him. So Isak decides to marry Sanja, and then Isak was on his way to Osaka when they were to see his brother. So, and then Joseph had stayed in the boarding house before this, how he stays there, and that's why the family moves to Japan, and that's how the story unfolds. In 1944, Isak dies. One of I'll talk about the next one. In 1945, World War II ends, and then 1965 is when Solomon is born in Osaka, and then the book ends in 1989. Do you have any questions about the family chart?
This is her story, obviously, not the real life.
Oh, yeah, it's fiction. But there are a lot of, I think, biographical details that come up in the book. Her grandpa being a minister, for example, from Busan, and then her grandpa had studied in Pyongyang and had studied theology in Japan also. I think back then there were more schools in Japan. And then her Min Jin's father is from Pyongyang, from North Korea, and then so I think Isak is from Pyongyang. Right? So there are biographical details that come up in the book. But yeah, it's a work of fiction. So the plot is it's divided into 3 books. Pachiko, and then the first one is Korea. This is in Korea or Gongsan, and that's the kanji for Korea. How do you read this in Japanese?
Kokyo.
Kokyo.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Same.
Same, yeah. It's a Korean Chinese system. So the book is set in Yeongdo, and then it begins with Huni and Yang Jin getting married through a matchmaker. Huni has deformity with his foot. It's got cleft lip, so it's hard for him to find a bride. But then he's pretty hardworking, and somehow they find him a match. And then they have a boarding house, and I talked about their daughter, Sanja, and then Hansu having an affair, and Isaac visits, and Isaac decides to marry Sanja because it was scandalous for her to be pregnant without her husband. So, and then the couple end up moving to Osaka because Sanja, because Isak has a job to teach at a church, at a Korean church in Osaka. And then Noah is born in Osaka is how the first book begins. And then second book begins in 1939, so it's the beginning of World War II, Pacific War, and then Wojasu is Noah's brother is born, and you can kind of see how they all have like a biblical names too, right? This is Moses, and Noah, obviously, and then Isaac, Joseph, and yeah, the whole book is kind of, I think, steeped in Bible. And then Min Jin has also said how she has a ritual before she begins writing. She reads a page of the Bible. And she said she's read the Bible maybe like 6-7 times from Luke. Yeah, she said her kind of a pre-writing ritual was reading like the New York Times, Wall Street Journal, and Financial Times before, because she was a lawyer before, and that's what she used to do. But that was not very conducive to writing fiction, so her writing ritual is reading the Bible. And then during this time, a member of Isaac's church gets arrested for refusing to participate in the Shinto rituals for the emperor. And Isaac is gone for a few years. And then there's a woman to Sanja, and then Kyung, who is her sister-in-law, and they become best friends, kind of navigating this new life in Japan. They become kimchi azuma, or like obatsan. They become like a kimchi entrepreneurs selling in like the open air market in Osaka near the station. And then Hansu returns to Sanja's life. And initially, so Sanja had gifted, Hansu had gifted Sanja a nice watch when they were in Busan. And then when they come to Osaka, Sanja sells it in a pawn market. And through that, once who traces Sanja And Wansu owns a Korean restaurant which hires Sunja and Johnny to make kimchi for them and then during the war, Hansu arranges their family also to flee to a farm during World War II. And then Yusen finds work in Nagasaki at this time. He becomes one of the victims of the nuclear holocaust too. He survives, but half of his body burns and kind of lives just in pain and bedridden for the rest of his life. And then meanwhile, Noah enters Waseda. Noah turns out to be a good scholar like his father, Isaac. And Wansu provides the scholarship for Noah to study at Waseda. And Mujasu begins work in Pachiko. Mujasu drops out of school, so Noah was kind of a nerd, kid. And then Mujasu liked to get into fights. He'd like beat up every Korean who was mean to him. And then so Sanja says you should just work in business rather than go to school if you don't want to go study. And then this book ends with Mujasu marrying Yumi, who's a seamstress at Mujasu's friend's mom's kind of a textile, which becomes a factory. And then Solomon is born at the end of book 2. And then book 3 is when kind of the Pachiko kind of the theme becomes more explicit. Noah learns that her father was is Hansu, and then not Isaac. And she's experiencing Hansu is kind of a yakuza, like a mythical business figure. And so Noah changes his name to Nobuo, but ends up working in Pachiko too, because that's the only industry he has access to once he moves to Nakano to begin a new life. But Hansu eventually tracks down Noah, and then Sonja visits him. They hadn't seen each other for many years, but during all this time, Noah had sent her money every month. But Noah wanted to begin a new life because it was shameful to be Korean. And after her visits, he kills himself. Sonja goes through a lot of suffering and tragedies in both at the individual family level and the historical level. So I think a lot of the book is about theodicy, right? Why does bad things happen to good people? And then and that's kind of how the book ends too. She kind of looks back on her life at a grave. But before then, and Yumi also dies. There are a lot of death in the fight. In this book, Yumi gets caught up in a car accident, and she kind of pushes Solomon out of the way, and then she dies. And then so Mujasu starts seeing this Japanese divorcee at Tsuko, and then Tsuko is from Hokkaido, but she comes with her daughter Hana visits her, and then so her daughter Hana falls in love with Solomon, which is a little bit scandalous because they're brothers and sisters by marriage, and then Solomon eventually goes to Colombia. Hana runs away and becomes a bar hostess, and then Solomon becomes a banker and comes back to Tokyo working for a British investment banking firm. And then some things happen, and the book ends with Solomon choosing to carry on with their family Pachiko business. So yeah, that was kind of my summary of the book. Does anybody have questions, or for those of you who read the book, do you have anything you want to add? Oh, okay. You should really read it for yourself. And a little bit about how she came to write the book. She says she got the book idea for the book in 1989. When she was in college, she didn't know what to do, and she went to this afternoon tea hosted by her dean, and then she met an American missionary from Japan talking about the Chinese experience of Korean Japanese here and all the discriminations they face. So that got her interested in the subject, and then she also heard about a Korean Japanese middle school boy who threw himself off of the building because of the bullying he experienced, and that makes it into a novel also, and then how that was kind of the genesis of the book. And she also talks about how difficult it was for her to get published. So if you are an aspiring fiction writer, don't give up. Yeah, she says after a good trip with law, she started working on it as early as 1996, but then she wasn't able to find a publisher. And then she says that's because after Chris gets a job at a bank in Tokyo, she moves here and she starts talking to a lot of Korean and Japanese people. And then I think that kind of gave her a sense that, like, I guess academically, all you hear about Korean Japanese is how much discrimination they've experienced here. But through talking to these girls, she realizes that they're much more than just their product of their history. I'm sorry?
I'm laughing because my mother-in-law would say, you know the Koreans are there, you can smell the garlic on the bread.
Yeah,
They love the garlic. I love the garlic.
And then food is kind of, I think she's very good at writing about food and fashion. And how kind of a fashion evolves over time. I think that's fun to track. And then I think she writes beautifully about creating food. So yeah, let's read some passages together in what I've given you. Do you have any questions about what I've said? Okay. Can somebody help me read this passage?
Okay, sorry. Yesterday morning, I had begun the study of Hosea, and then a few hours later, the boarding house I've been looking for a while told me about her pregnant daughter. By evening, I knew. The Lord was speaking to me. This has never happened to me before. I've never felt that kind of clarity. Isaac felt it was safe to admit this here. Has this ever happened to you? He checked for doubt in the elder pastor's eyes.
Thank you. So the context for this passage is when Isaac decided to marry Sanja, and then she said, Isaac says he had clarity while reading the Bible. And then so Isaac had an office of a more experienced senior pastor in Busan, and he's asking the pastor, what do you think about my plans? And what do you think, how would you respond? What do you think how do you think the pastor may have responded? Bless you.
If I recall correctly from the story, they didn't actually really know each other in person for very long before that
No,
either,
they
right?
didn't. Yeah.
So he was seeking his counsel as an elder brother in Christ, but one basically just as a brother in Christ, not as somebody that he already has a history over years with. And so I think the elder pastor was maybe a little bit surprised, a little concerned whether Isaac was making the right decision in that moment.
Yeah. I think Isaac was in the boarding house for just a few months, and then the boarding house family was taking care of him. Yeah, basically, we did not know each other well. So here's how the pastor responds. Can somebody read this?
Yes, it has happened to me, but not always so vividly. I hear the voice of God when I read the Bible. So yes, I suppose I understand what he felt. But there are coincidences too. We have to be open to that. It's dangerous to think that everything is a sign from God. But perhaps God is always talking to us, but we don't know how to listen, Sheen stated. It felt awkward to confess this uncertainty, but he thought it was important.
Thank you. You sounded like the old pastor Shane.
I wanted to speak so everybody could hear.
Yeah, thank you. So, which I think is a pretty good response. Jean, do you have any thoughts about this passage as a prayer and healing team member?
Now I'm stuck in the middle where it says, it's dangerous to think that everything is a sign from God. I tend to take everything as a sign from God.
She tends to think everything is a sign from God.
Oh, I see. I am dealing with that in my life right now, that something was a sign from God. How is that understood? And I think being open to the fact that maybe it could be related to something else rather than something that transcended kind of communication. It depends on what it means to how you live your life then. So.
Have any of you experienced something like this? You're praying or reading the Bible, you think it's a voice from God, but you're not sure? As you talk to your spiritual mentors, or
I don't know if this is exactly the same, but sometimes when bad things happen to you, you think, oh, maybe this is a sign from God, or this was, I deserve this in some way, or, and maybe it's just kind of not being in that mindset and accepting that some things are just out of your control or random, and I think that uncertainty is just part of life, and that's kind of what is emphasized.
I think a lot of the book is about that, as I said, why does bad things. Like Sanja goes through so much suffering, right? Like her lover refuses to marry her. Her husband dies in prison for not participating in the Shinto rituals during the war. Her son-in-law commits suicide, and then she just works tirelessly throughout all her life. So, but she's, I think most characters in the book are kind of depicted as good people who are always trying to do the right thing. Otherwise, life's so hard then. And I just add in this passage, Hosea. Do you know why she's talking about the prophet Hosea? Do you know who Hosea marries? He marries a prostitute. Yeah, so I think that's why, that's the connection. And God tells her to marry the prostitute as a sign of Israel's unfaithfulness, or God's continuing faithfulness towards Israel. Any other thoughts about these two passages? Move to the next one then. And so this is halfway through the book, and this is a last scene with Isaac. And then he's just he goes to jail with Shin, the pastor who no, sorry, not with Shin, with another pastor that he works with in Osaka. And the pastor and the other church member dies, but he's just released just right before he dies. And these are the kind of the last days he spends back with his family, with Noah and Mojasu. And can I get help? Let's get two readers. Can somebody be Isaac and somebody be the narrator?
You can read.
Okay, you want to be the narrator or Isaac?
You read?
You can narrate. Okay, who wants to be Isaac? Thank you. Okay, let's go.
There were many things he hadn't told the child yet about life, about learning, and how to talk to God. Carrying his book bag and bento, Noah lingered by the front door, memorizing his father's kindly face.
Child, come here.
Isaac said. Noah approached him and sat on bended knees.
Please, God, please make my father well. I'll ask about this just once more, please.
Noah shut his eyes tightly. Isaac took Noah's hand and held it.
You are very brave, Noah. much, much braver than me. Living every day in the presence of those who refuse to acknowledge your humanity takes great courage. My child, he said.
And Isaac let go of his son's hand.
My dear boy, my blessing.
Any thoughts or feelings about this passage?
I relate it to any out-group that doesn't get the recognition for their humanity too. So this is one situation where this person, because of their ethnicity, their humanity wasn't understood, it wasn't there. So, but other people in other life situations have the same thing.
And I think Isaac in some ways the most kind of exclusively Christian character in the book because he's a minister and he's really depicted as a saint who's always looking out for others. But he was always been kind of a sickly child, and it's and he's also grateful for Sanja's family for kind of helping him when he was almost dying. And yeah, he's depicted as like a very sweet, gentle man. The book ends with Sanja visiting his graveyard too. And one of the things, I guess I'll talk about it later.
I think this passage kind of really ties into what you were talking about earlier too, just about how bad things happen when the science. Because I mean, you're pushing it further here, but Noah was just a boy, and he's praying a very innocent prayer for somebody who's also a really good person. So asking God for something with all his sincerity that he can muster, and it doesn't work out, right? It doesn't happen the way no one wants it to happen. And so like sometimes we just have to live with that disappointment and stuff.
There's also, I guess, this lesson of fighting back with kindness. At least that's what I'm getting from what Isaac is telling Noah. And my Christian knowledge of lessons and morals is admittedly a bit weak, but I think that is kind of one of the principles of fighting back with kindness.
And then, so Noah and Musasu respond very differently to the discrimination they face in Japan. Noah tries to outstudy all the Japanese kids who are making fun of him. But Musasu decides to fight back. So, with his fist, he takes justice to his hands. So I think that's kind of two different approaches to dealing with injustice for kids and for adults too. And it's interesting because Musasu is Hansu's blood son. I'm sorry, Musasu is the second son, is Isaac's blood son, and Isaac's more of a pastor, kind of more like a pacifist kind of guy. But his son turns out to be a more like Kohansu business person, whereas Kohansu's biological son Noah, who's Kohansu's kind of is like a thug billionaire. Yakuza tycoon turns out to be the more scholarly academic type. We go to the next passage. Sorry, I didn't print it well. Next passage begins with last line of page 1, and we're going to go to the next page. Can I get 3 people? We want Hannah. So Hannah is like the pregnant child of Etsuko, who is Mosesu's second partner. After his wife Yumi dies. So Hannah, and then it's Solomon, Mosesu's son. who goes to international school. So Mojasu moves to Yokohama and then starts his own Pachiko parlor there. And this is after, this is towards the end of the book. And Hannah, even though is doing a successful restaurant entrepreneur, Hannah didn't get much attention from her mother growing up. So Hannah runs away and becomes a bar hostess. But Asuko does manage to track her down eventually. But by then, Hannah had contracted STDs, and then she's about to die. So this is the last conversation that Hannah has with Solomon. Hannah was Solomon's first lover, but Solomon by this point has studied at Columbia and come back with a Korean American girlfriend. So this is where the conversation takes place. And could I have Hannah, does anybody want to be Solomon? Somebody who hasn't read Solomon? Okay, thank you. Who's going to be Hannah? Okay, who wants to be the narrator? Eugene, can we volunteer you since you're a professional?
Okay, I'll do my best.
Okay, thank you. Okay, let's go. Hannah, you begin.
Where is that?
Oh, at the end of page 1. Sorry, it's kind of confusing.
Okay. And there are two people in Pachiko too. Like your father. I didn't know you like
Oh, sorry, that's Solomon.
Okay, sorry.
I didn't know you liked toddler.
That's you.
You know, after I got here, he visited me every Sunday when Mama needed a break. Sometimes when I was pretending to be asleep, I catch him praying to me in a chair. I don't believe in God, but I guess that doesn't matter. I never had someone pray for me before. So,
Solomon closed his eyes and nodded.
Sorry, go on.
your grandmother Sonja and great aunt Kungi visit me on Saturdays. Did you know that? They pray for me too. I don't understand that Jesus stuff, but it's something holy to have people touch you when you are sick. And as they hear I pray to touch me, your grandmother Sonja holds my hands.
Thank you. And then earlier, before this scene, we see Solomon and Hannah together at Yangjin's, the first generation matriarch, her funeral. And then Hannah's telling Moses, like, I'm bored, let's go there, get a drink. And Hannah asks Solomon, are you Christian? I heard like all Christians are like cult followers. So she has a pretty like bad impression of Christians. But I think it's Christians coming to her rescue at the end of her life, coming to her help at the end of her life. Any thoughts or feelings about this passage?
I don't know about the context, but the comment about by the man I was pretending to be asleep, I'd catch him praying for me in that chair. I don't believe in God, but I guess that doesn't matter. I never had someone pray for me before. And the next paragraph, it's something holy to have people touch you when you're sick. I found, especially in Japan, people like to be prayed for. They're very open to it. Even though they're not Christian, they don't know anything about the Christian religion, but many times I've said to someone, can I just pray for you? Yes, please. I did many times with my students. I said, can I pray for you? Yes. Only once in decades of teaching, only once a student said, no. And then she came back 3 days later and said, will you pray for me? Yeah, I found it very powerful. Someone that I was working with in the theatre found out that she had cancer. And I just said, could I say a prayer for you? Tears poured down her face. She wasn't Christian at all, but I think it's amazing what God does. And I think God does a lot more than we give him credit for when we pray. The other person doesn't have to be a Christian. He uses us to bless that person.
So you pray for them in English or Japanese?
Pardon?
You pray for them in English or Japanese?
I usually pray, it depends on what language we're speaking normally. If they're my students and I think their English is up to it, I pray in English. But one time, I had a student who had been absent for a year because she'd witnessed a man jumping in front of a train. And she'd been traumatized and she missed a whole year of classes and she came back. Her mother brought her to school every day. And her mother brought her to my classroom. And the mother didn't speak English. So I prayed for them both in Japanese. It just depends on whichever language is the better. I mean, if I speak Japanese better than they speak English, then I use Japanese. If their English is better than my Japanese, we use English.
I wonder if part of that is, I think a lot of Japanese people grow up Shinto and Buddhist, right? And I wonder if maybe they don't get as much tailored and personal prayers either in Buddhism or Shintoism. I'm not sure.
Depends on the family. I think some people they grow up with sleep, but maybe not really. I'm not sure. I don't know much about people who grew up with simple Buddhists.
Shall we get to the last passage? Jane, I feel like we gotta have you read again.
Okay. You want me as a narrator?
Yeah, I think just narrator is enough actually.
Just a moment.
Yes.
I don't think there is any narration. I think the whole thing is a quotation.
Oh yeah, sorry, quotation is like just from the book. That is just narrator.
That's from what she was seeing right
Yeah, so,
the way through the whole
this is one of the last pages of the I can explain a little bit. This is one of the last pages of the book. And then she is visiting Isaac's graveyard. And she sees Isaac's graveyard is written in Korean and Japanese in 1907 to 1944. So this is 45 years after Isaac died. And then she also learns on this trip that even though Noah had run away from the family because she didn't want to deal with anything Korean and he wanted to begin a new life as a Japanese man, and she learns that Noah had been visiting Isaac's grave every month for decades. So, yes, please, Jean.
What she was seeing again in her dreams was her youth, her beginning, and her wishes. So this was how she became a woman. Without Hansu and Isaac and Noah, there wouldn't have been this pilgrimage to this land. Beyond the dailiness, there had been moments of shimmering beauty and some glory too, even in this Ajuma's Obachan's life, even if no one knew it was true. There was consolation. The people you loved, they were always there with you, she had learned. Sometimes she could be in front of a train kiosk or the window of a bookstore, and she could feel Noah's small hand when he was a boy. And she would close her eyes and think of this sweet grassy smell and remember that he had always tried his best. At those moments, it was good to be alone, to hold on to him.
And then so she becomes a church lady after marrying Isaac, and then the family keeps going to church, and then I guess there are many pastors in the book after Isaac dies, but still they mention that they continue going to church. And then, I appreciate the religious language that Min Jin uses. Right, the pilgrimage, her kind of, you can argue, how she sanctifies her immigration, how Min Jin sanctifies Sunja's immigration to Japan, even though it wasn't completely voluntary, and even though she experiences so many tragedies in Japan. And then that's the very religious language of glory and like beauty, right, is used to describe her life. And then I guess in material terms too, she has a designer bag with her by this point that Pachiko, that her daughter-in-law had got her, and how she was a poor kind of subsistence worker all her life. There is some material comfort and wealth at the end. And then I thought how she, there's a scene in the book in which her mother, Yang Jing, accuses Sunja of just caring about Noah and Yuzasu, and then not taking care of everybody else in her life, and how she kind of idolizes her children. Sunja is criticized for that. But how she just remembers Noah, who had committed suicide as a middle-aged man. She still has this memory of Noah from when he was a child that she holds on to all her life. Anything that comes to your mind from this passage?
I'm surprised, not suicide. I don't know. Because what I see him is he's really accepted Isaac or his unconditional love. And how he turned to suicide, I just wonder. And because I don't read all that. See, I already want anymore.
We have to read the book to find out.
Yeah, what happened to him?
Yeah. Well, I think Noah was just Noah's kind of small inside because he's like this man of high morals, and then he feels he has contaminated blood because he's Hansu's son, and then Hansu's family has helped Sunja's family throughout, and he never forgives Hansu, and then he never kind of forgives Sunja for sleeping with Hansu when she was a teenager. After Hansu finds him in Nagano, and then Sunja visits, and then their encounter after a decade apart is pleasant, but she learns that soon after she left his office, he shot himself.
It does seem like this final sentiment of acceptance and self-acceptance, especially with regard to trauma as well, because most of the time in traumatic experiences, people of course would want to, if they could, erase these painful memories, but at the same time accepting that you are who you are because of the painful memories, and you wouldn't have the relationships and experiences that make you you without them. And so it's that kind of balance that I think she was finally accepting.
Yang Jin, her mother is very mad at her death. At her death, Yang Jin is like, why did you bring me here? You should have never been with Hansu. So I'm kind of conscious of that, and how Sunja accepts her life. Any last minute thoughts or questions about the book, and then the lady whom we'll meet next week?
I'd just like to say, sure, she's a huge gift to the Japanese culture and what it has gone through from Japan to America, and telling the story of immigration, like many other groups have had their, like my own group had its own story of immigration. And this is, again, it's a gift that she's given to everyone to understand that.
Yeah, I think that's what makes her book so relatable and resonant to the story of migration across generations,
Across continents.
across continents. Any other last comments, thoughts? Oh. Thank you all for coming here then. It was fun. And then if you haven't read the book yet, you still have time before she, or any questions that any of you would like to ask her that Kathy and I can consider. Do you have any questions you'd like to ask her? Because I don't know if we're going to have time for audience. I don't know what the format will be, because I think making kind of live audience thing, you may get a little bit edgy, dodgy questions.
Is she coming in person or is it online?
She wanted to, but it's going to be online.
It's
She
online.
said she's too busy. Yeah, she wanted to do a little homecoming, coming to her spiritual nest for 4 years. But she's... Yeah, or you can email me if you have any questions you want to ask her. Thank you all for coming today. Wonderful Sunday.
Very nice.